It was a chilly January morning in Washington, D.C., and the world's eyes were fixed on the grand steps of the Capitol building. Donald J. Trump stood tall, ready to be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Beside him, Melania Trump was the picture of elegance in a striking blue ensemble, complete with a wide-brimmed hat that seemed to radiate both sophistication and mystery. But as the cameras zoomed in, an unexpected moment began to unfold, one that would be dissected by pundits and the public alike for weeks to come. As the Chief Justice prepared the Bible for Trump to take his oath, he turned to his wife, his eyes brimming with a mix of pride and vulnerability. The world seemed to hold its breath as Donald leaned toward Melania, intending to plant a kiss on her cheek. But as he moved closer, the brim of her hat obstructed the gesture. Their movements became an awkward dance, a near miss that left them both smiling uneasily. The moment passed quickly, but not before it was captured by every camera in the vicinity. Social media erupted almost instantly. "The kiss that missed," the headline screamed. Memes began to circulate within minutes, casting the moment in both humorous and critical lights. Despite the minor mishap, Trump's inaugural address began without a hitch. His speech was powerful, filled with his characteristic bravado, but also laced with surprising notes of humility and gratitude. He spoke of unity, of hope, and of a renewed vision for America. Yet behind the podium, Trump's mind kept replaying the earlier moment with Melania. It gnawed at him, not because of the potential embarrassment, but because of what it symbolized. He knew the world often saw them as distant, even cold. He wanted this day to be different, to show the world and his wife how deeply he valued her. As the speech drew to a close, Trump's voice grew more emotional. He looked directly at Melania, standing poised and graceful among the dignitaries and family members behind him. "And finally," he said, his voice catching for the briefest of moments, "to my wife, Melania, you have been my rock, my confidant, and my unwavering support through the toughest storms. Today is not just my day, it is ours. Thank you for believing in me when the world doubted. I love you." The audience erupted into applause, and even Melania, known for her reserved demeanor, seemed visibly moved. Her eyes glistened as she offered him a warm smile. But Trump wasn't done. As he stepped away from the podium, he made a beeline for her. The cameras tracked his every move, the buzz of curiosity palpable in the air. The tension built as Trump reached her, standing just a foot away. He hesitated for a moment, as if the weight of the world rested on this next gesture. Then, in a move both deliberate and tender, he gently removed her hat, placing it carefully in her hands. The audience gasped softly, the intimacy of the act catching everyone off guard. Trump leaned in once more, and this time there were no barriers. He kissed her, not the perfunctory peck often exchanged by political couples, but a genuine, heartfelt kiss that spoke volumes. It was a moment of vulnerability, a rare glimpse into the man behind the title. The crowd erupted into cheers, and even some of his staunchest critics couldn't help but feel a twinge of admiration for the raw humanity of the scene. For a brief moment, the divisions that had defined the campaign seemed to fade, replaced by a shared sense of witnessing something real and unpolished. As they parted, Melania's face lit up with a radiant smile. She whispered something inaudible to Trump, who chuckled softly before taking her hand. Together, they turned to face the crowd, their fingers intertwined. The image of the two of them standing united in that moment became the defining photograph of the day, gracing the front pages of newspapers around the globe. Backstage, away from the cameras and the crowd, Melania looked at Donald with a mix of amusement and affection. "You didn't have to make such a big show of it," she teased. Trump grinned, a boyish glint in his eye. "Maybe not, but sometimes, Melania, you've got to remind people of what really matters." Their laughter echoed through the halls, a sound rare and precious in the world they inhabited. And as the day's events continued, the world's fascination with "the kiss that missed" was gradually replaced by admiration for "the kiss that redeemed." The moment became legend, a story retold in countless forms over the years. Some saw it as a carefully crafted political move. Others believed it was a genuine expression of love. But for Donald and Melania, it was simply a moment, a fleeting yet unforgettable reminder that even in the spotlight, they were just two people navigating the complexities of love and partnership. As the sun set over Washington, the first couple found a quiet moment alone in the White House. Donald stood by the window, looking out at the city that was now his to lead. Melania joined him, slipping her arm through his. They stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the day settling around them. "Do you think they'll ever stop talking about that hat?" Melania asked with a smirk. Donald chuckled. Probably not, but let them talk. We've got bigger things to do. And with that, they turned away from the window, stepping into the next chapter of their lives together. The world watched, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they were writing their own story, one kiss at a time. The weeks following the inauguration were a whirlwind of meetings, press conferences, and political maneuvering. Despite the heavy workload, the moment on the Capitol steps continued to linger in the public consciousness. Late-night talk show hosts riffed on it, comedians turned it into skits, and social media users endlessly debated whether the kiss had been planned or spontaneous. For Donald and Melania, however, the moment had taken on a deeper significance. One evening, as the White House settled into an unusual calm, Donald found himself in the private residence, flipping through a photo album Melania had brought with her from New York. It contained snapshots from their early days, her modeling shoots, their first vacations together, and candid moments with their son Barron. He paused at a photo of the two of them at Mar-a-Lago, dancing during their wedding reception. Melania's smile in the photo was radiant, her eyes locked on his as if nothing else in the world mattered. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said, glancing up as Melania entered the room. She walked over, her bare feet making no sound on the plush carpet. Taking a seat beside him, she looked at the photo and smiled wistfully. "Yes, we have. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Donald closed the album and turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "You know, I've been thinking about that day at the inauguration. I didn't want it to just be a show for the cameras. I wanted it to mean something." Melania placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but grounding. "It did. For me, it did. And I think the world saw that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their roles, the scrutiny they lived under, and the challenges ahead were ever present, but in that quiet room, they allowed themselves a rare moment of peace. The following morning, Donald surprised Melania with a small gesture. As they prepared for a state dinner, he presented her with a new hat, an elegant, understated piece that complemented her gown perfectly. Inside the brim, he had inscribed a simple message: "To my partner in all things." Melania's eyes glistened as she read the words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "For what?" Donald asked, his tone teasing. "For reminding me," she said, placing the hat carefully on her head, "that even in the spotlight, it's the little things that matter." As they stepped out to face the cameras once again, their hands brushed briefly, a small but significant gesture that spoke volumes. And though the world continued to scrutinize and analyze their every move, Donald and Melania Trump knew that some things were meant to remain just between them, quiet moments of love and connection that no headline could ever capture. As the weeks turned into months, the Trump administration faced its share of triumphs and challenges. While the political world buzzed with controversies and debates, Donald and Melania continued to find quiet moments of connection amidst the storm. The inauguration's emotional kiss had sparked an unexpected shift, not just in how the world perceived them, but in their own relationship. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Donald returned to the private quarters of the White House. His tie was loosened, his shoulders slumped, and the weight of the presidency was etched on his face. Melania was waiting for him in the sitting room, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. Without a word, she handed it to him, her gaze soft and understanding. "Tough day?" she asked. Donald took a sip of the tea and sighed. "You have no idea. Sometimes it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough." Melania sat beside him, her presence calm and grounding. "You can't please everyone, Donald, but you can stay true to yourself." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? For the country? For us?" Melania reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. "I think you're doing what you believe is right, and that's all anyone can ask. Just don't forget why you started this journey." Her words lingered with him, a reminder of the conviction that had driven him to this point. It wasn't just about power or legacy, it was about making a difference, however imperfectly. As the months turned into years, the first couple's bond continued to evolve. Publicly, they remained a source of fascination and speculation, but privately, they found solace in each other's company. They developed small rituals to stay connected, evening walks in the rose garden, late-night talks over coffee, and quiet moments spent flipping through old photo albums. One particularly memorable evening, Donald surprised Melania with a private dinner on the South Lawn. The area had been transformed into a romantic haven, complete with string lights and a soft violin melody playing in the background. Melania's eyes widened as she stepped onto the lawn, her breath catching at the sight. "What is this?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Donald shrugged, his expression uncharacteristically shy. "Just wanted to do something special for you. You deserve it." As they dined under the stars, they reminisced about their early days together, their first date, their travels, and the challenges they had overcome as a couple. The conversation eventually turned to their son, Barron, who was growing up quickly and finding his own place in the world. "He's so much like you," Melania said, her voice tinged with both pride and nostalgia. "Strong, determined, but with a kind heart." Donald smiled, his gaze softening. "He gets the kind heart from you. I just hope he knows how proud we are of him." Melania reached across the table, her hand resting on his. "He does, and he'll carry what we've taught him into everything he does." The evening was a rare moment of respite, a reminder of what truly mattered. As they danced under the stars, the world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them and the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came their way together. As Donald's presidency drew to a close, the couple reflected on the journey they had shared, the highs and lows, the triumphs and setbacks. Each moment had shaped them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. On their final night in the White House, they stood together in the Oval Office, the room now filled with boxes and memories. "It feels strange to be leaving," Donald said, his voice quiet. "This place has been our home for so long." Melania nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "It's not the place that matters. It's what we take with us." He turned to her, his expression contemplative. "Do you think we made a difference?" She smiled, her hand resting gently on his arm. "Yes, and not just for the country, for us too." The next morning, as they boarded Marine One for the last time, the weight of the moment was palpable. The crowd cheered, the cameras flashed, and the world watched as they waved goodbye to the chapter that had defined their lives for 4 tumultuous years. As the helicopter ascended, Donald turned to Melania. "So what's next for us?" She laughed softly, her eyes sparkling. "Whatever we want, as long as we're together." And with that, they began the next chapter of their journey, ready to face whatever the future held with the same resilience and love that had carried them through the presidency. For Donald and Melania Trump, the story was far from over. It was just beginning. As the helicopter carried Donald and Melania Trump away from the White House for the last time, the sense of finality hung in the air. Below Washington, D.C. sprawled out like a tapestry, the landmarks now symbols of a chapter closed. For the first time in years, Donald felt the heavy weight of leadership lift from his shoulders. He glanced at Melania, who sat composed but reflective, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The silence between them was not uncomfortable but contemplative, a moment of shared understanding as they moved into uncharted territory. The flight took them to their Florida estate, Mar-a-Lago, a place that had always served as a retreat but now felt like a new beginning. As they landed and stepped onto the familiar grounds, the warmth of the Florida sun seemed to welcome them home. The staff had lined up to greet them, their smiles genuine as they applauded the return of the couple who had become both employer and symbol during their tenure in Washington. That evening, a small, intimate dinner was held in their honor. Close friends and family gathered, the atmosphere filled with laughter and nostalgia. Barron, now taller than his father, stood by his parents, quietly observing the moment. Ivanka and her siblings shared stories of their father's presidency, moments both humorous and poignant. But it was Melania who stole the evening when she rose to speak. "These past years have been challenging, rewarding, and unforgettable," she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "We have learned so much about ourselves, about this country, and about the strength it takes to lead. I am grateful for the opportunities, for the support of our family, and for all of you who have stood by us. But most of all, I am grateful to my husband. Donald, you have shown resilience, determination, and a love for this nation that inspires me every day. Thank you for sharing this journey with me." The room erupted in applause, and Donald, visibly moved, stood to embrace her. It was a simple yet profound moment, one that captured the essence of their partnership, unspoken strength, and mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, Donald and Melania began to settle into their new life. For Melania, it was a chance to focus on her initiatives without the constraints of the First Lady's role. She dedicated herself to expanding her Be Best campaign, addressing issues of online bullying and children's mental health. Without the glare of political scrutiny, her efforts flourished, drawing attention for their tangible impact rather than the controversies that had often overshadowed them. Donald, on the other hand, found himself at a crossroads. The businessman in him itched to return to his ventures, but the politician in him couldn't ignore the pull of the public stage. He began writing a memoir, a candid reflection on his time in office, filled with the triumphs and challenges that had defined his presidency. Late nights often found him in his study, poring over drafts and reminiscing about the decisions that had shaped his administration. Melania would occasionally join him, a cup of tea in hand. She'd sit quietly, reading or sketching designs for a new charitable initiative she was planning. These moments of quiet companionship became a cornerstone of their new routine, a reminder that amidst the chaos of their public lives, their private bond remained steadfast. One evening as they sat together, Donald turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Do you think we did enough?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Melania placed her hand on his. "You gave everything you had, and you've left a mark that won't be forgotten. That's more than enough." Her words seemed to settle something in him, a reassurance that allowed him to breathe a little easier. Months turned into a year, and life at Mar-a-Lago took on a rhythm. They hosted events, welcomed dignitaries, and found joy in the simpler aspects of life. Long walks along the beach, quiet dinners, and time spent with family. Yet, the world hadn't forgotten them. Letters from supporters and critics alike poured in, and their presence in the media remained as polarizing as ever. One particular evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Melania handed Donald a letter she had received. It was from a young mother in Iowa, thanking her for her work with children's mental health. The woman's daughter had benefited from a program inspired by the Be Best initiative, and the letter was filled with gratitude. Donald read it carefully, his expression softening. "You've made a real difference, Melania," he said, handing the letter back to her. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "So have you, and there's still more we can do." Her words lingered with him, sparking an idea that had been quietly forming in the back of his mind. Over the next few weeks, Donald began to outline plans for a new foundation, one that would focus on empowering small businesses, supporting veterans, and fostering community development. Melania's initiatives would be a central part of the foundation, their efforts combining to create a lasting legacy. As the foundation took shape, it became a family endeavor. Ivanka and Jared brought their business acumen, Eric and Don Jr. focused on outreach, and Barron, now a young man with a keen interest in technology, contributed ideas for digital engagement. The Trumps' efforts were met with both praise and skepticism, but they pressed on, driven by a shared commitment to giving back. 1 year to the day after leaving the White House, the Trump family hosted the foundation's inaugural gala. The event was a resounding success, drawing a mix of supporters, former colleagues, and even some unlikely allies. Donald and Melania stood side by side as they addressed the attendees, their message one of unity and hope. "This foundation is not about politics," Donald said, his voice steady and clear. "It's about people. It's about giving back to the communities that make this country great. And it's about building a future we can all be proud of." Melania followed, her words equally heartfelt. "Our time in Washington taught us many things, but the most important lesson was this. True leadership is about service. We are here to serve, and we hope this foundation will make a lasting difference." The evening ended with a standing ovation, the crowd's applause a testament to the impact of their message. As Donald and Melania returned to their table, he leaned over and whispered, "You were amazing up there." She smiled, her hand finding his under the table. "So were you." In the quiet moments after the gala, as the guests departed and the staff began to clean up, Donald and Melania found themselves alone on the terrace. The night was cool, the stars bright against the dark sky. They stood together, looking out over the estate that had become their sanctuary. "Do you ever miss it?" Donald asked, breaking the silence. Melania considered the question, her gaze thoughtful. "Sometimes, but I think we're where we're meant to be now." He nodded, his arm slipping around her waist. "Me too." As they stood there, the weight of the past seemed to lift, leaving only the promise of what lay ahead. For Donald and Melania Trump, the journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to write their story, not as former president and first lady, but as partners united by a shared purpose and an enduring love.